Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi. Joining me here in the studio is my colleague Varghese P. Abraham, and Hawaii's wildfire disaster is going to be our focus over the next couple of minutes. Today's page one, we did talk about it, very briefly. People got down in the comment sections and told us that this is something that, in fact, they'd like to talk about. Now, 2,100 acres of land was under fire. 2,200 structures have been damaged or completely destroyed. Cars have been left gutted. Houses and buildings left charred.
Close to 100 people.
Close to 100 people. That's the death toll. And Hawaii wildfires have been declared the deadliest in the United States in over 100 years. Now, close to 100 people have been dead in the Hawaii wildfire that has burnt down an entire town and has resulted in complete devastation of the island territory of the United States. It's funny, Varghese, because people are saying that there is growing outrage towards the administration. They're saying that they did not put out the right kind of word. There were very cryptic messages on social media, not a PSA, not a public service announcement that, this is going to be, like Joe Biden put it, a major natural disaster, and at the same time, in over the last 100 years, the deadliest wildfire in Hawaii, more importantly in the United States. Now, there is criticism that government inaction led to the deaths due to the fire. Historical coastal town of Maui has been destroyed in this fire. 2,200 buildings, ladies and gentlemen, have been destroyed in Lahania. This is what we're picking up. Before we open, this discussion, broaden its horizon, we've got some expert panelists with us. I'm going to introduce them in just a short while. Before all of that, Varghese, let's listen into the governor, what the governor has to say in terms of the latest update coming out of Hawaii.
Over time, we'll be able to figure out if we could have better protected people. That's why we're reviewing everything. And we want to do that in a very open and transparent way. But it was complicated by the fact that there were multiple fires across this beautiful island at the same time. But having seen that storm, we have doubts that much could have been done with a fiery, fast-moving fire like that.
Well, so that was Josh Green, the governor of Hawaii. Of course, Captain retrospect, everything makes sense when you look back, Varghese. But let's take this question with the panelist who's with us on the broadcast. Joining us is Harjeet Singh, Senior Advisor, Climate Impacts, Climate Action Network International. Harjeet Singh ji, first and foremost, help us understand, because we just heard the governor of Hawaii, Josh Green, saying that, we're trying to review the situation. I mean, that's what politicians and, FITRE and administration on the ground end up doing in any case. But now we're looking at a death toll that could rise above the 100, figure. Cadaver dogs and the rescue personnel on the ground trying to search through burnt up cars and charred buildings. Why did this happen in the first place? People are talking about cryptic messages on social media, not proper public service announcements.
Thank you for having me, and I must mention at the outset that there are many references, this being a natural disaster. This is not a natural disaster. While the origin could be natural or even human-made in terms of, probably caused because of cigarette butts or because of campfire and many other accidents that can cause this problem. But let's understand that how climate change is fueling such wildfires. Important to know that Hawaii now has average temperature rise of 2 degrees than it was in 1950. Hawaii is witnessing an extremely dry weather. The disturbances in the southern islands, they've seen hurricanes, which has actually brought more wind, which has intensified fires. It's a combination of factors. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report early this year talked about compounding and cascading effects. This is a testimony of such effects increasing, that how climate change is going to cause more and more impacts and increase their intensity and frequency. This is one such case.
Right, and at the same time, the pain and anger and the outrage among the people on the ground. Would you like to throw some light on that? I mean, of course, it's a time where people should come together, help each other out. But criticism towards the ruling dispensation, do you think it's justified?
First of all, no government, and imagine we are talking about the United States, the richest country. The fact is, nobody is prepared to deal with this scale of impact. But at the same time, we need to recognize that we knew about climate change 50 years ago, and particularly the US, and it's really sad to see people suffering on ground. But we should not just blame the government of Hawaii, which is caught unaware with the scale of the crisis. But the reality is that the whole world is not prepared to deal with it. And United States in particular, that is one responsible for climate change. It has put most greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which are those heat trapping gases that are responsible for the climate crisis. And now the whole world is getting affected. You know, at one point, US thought that it's only going to be developing countries and countries like India and Nepal and Malawi who are going to be impacted. But look at how the whole world, we have seen such wildfires also in Greece. We have seen, you know, similar situations in Australia a couple of years ago. And we're also seeing droughts and floods happening. So it is a real risk that we are facing, and impacts are increasing. No government is prepared, but we should also look at the cause of the problem as well.
Absolutely. No, you know, pertinent points you've mentioned out there. And Spain is another example, only very recently, the Spanish wildfires. But now, at the same time, you know, you gave us the example of how a cigarette butt could, you know, lead to something like this. We know how forest fires today are being called as man-made, not natural, wildfires. Why are we calling the Hawaii, fires as wildfires when the, the cause behind this fire is not yet ascertained? We don't know what led to such fire. Why are we calling it wildfires? And the President of the United States, the richest country, like you suggested, he's gone out on record to say that, you know, this is the deadliest wildfire in the last, century. Why are we calling them wildfires?
Probably the reason they're calling it wildfires because it's happening in the wild, it's originating in the wild, but the reasons that are intensifying and fueling the fire are all human-made. And this is where we need to really send a very clear message about the cause and now the increasing impacts. In fact, many of the disasters that we used to call natural disasters are not natural anymore. Each and every weather-related disaster has a handprint of climate change and global warming that is, you know, increasing the intensity and frequency. And that's what world has to recognize. We are living through the climate emergency. Scientists told us years ago that extreme weather events are going to be new normal. Look at, you know, you switch on television and you look around, every other day we are now hearing about a massive disaster happening in one part of the other.
Extreme weather events. You're absolutely right over there. You're absolutely right over there. Varghese, take a look at what's happening in Hawaii and our, wildfires, forest fires back at home in Uttarakhand, in Himachal Pradesh. You hear about forest fires in Corbett. The cost to rebuild Lahaina has been estimated at $5.5 billion. Do you think something like that, if that happens in India, the scale, the magnitude, the magnanimity of forest fire?
It's going to be huge in the sense that it's going to be an economic disaster if we are going to see such, weather changes. And see, it has a cascading effect. When you have a situation like this, it's going to take a toll on the economy. Once it takes toll on the economy, of course, it'll have a cascading effect on stability of that country's society and later whatever is going to happen. So people are taking it with a pinch of salt. And in fact, there are people who tend to deny climate change as such. I was also looking at some of the aspects, as a guest was saying, it's man-made. And a very interesting factor over here, I was just going through those reports. There is this particular grass which is non-native to this area of Hawaii. And that grass comprises around 26% of Hawaii. And that grass dries up easily, and that has been one of the reasons why this fire has been spreading so fast. And then you have Hurricane Dora. Its winds are also fanning the flames. So there are multiple events that have come together over here. And also, at the same time, we should not forget that the locals have been saying that their social media was the only way they kept these warnings going on. And most of them were driving into the fire. Areas which had the wildfire going, they were actually driving into that area as well. So administrative collapse is also quite highlighted in this particular aspect as such. So it's a the thing is, it's a huge, combination of factors that have led to this scale of disaster that we are seeing over here. Towns have been destroyed, and as they were saying, if it's going to take $5 billion to in fact reconstruct the lives of people, bring in the infrastructure back again, the bigger question that should be asking is that, are we going to keep paying for all these disasters? Because at a point we won't be able to pay. Governments won't be able to pay. They won't be able to mitigate this if it starts rising like this. And 2-degree increase in temperatures does lead to drying out of vegetation in a lot of places, and dried vegetation is a recipe for disaster.
Right, and Mr. Harjeet, at the same time, of course, it seems like precaution is better than cure is the way to go over here. But can you give us a real-time update in terms of where are these fires right now? The visuals that we're getting are essentially of the aftermath. It's all charcoal and grayscale from where we're looking at things. But how contained are these fires, and if there are any fires, where are they right now when we're looking at Hawaii?
Well, fires continue to increase while government is trying to adopt all kinds of measures. And as Verghese said, the current weather is not really helping. And it's also being estimated that as they complete the rescue operations, the number of casualties are going to go up. So fires continue to increase, and it's not slowing down, and it's making the life of people as well as government really, really difficult. So it is still a very grave situation, and next few hours are going to be extremely critical to contain the fire, but also rescue people.
And how big of a dent is this going to be on the Hawaiian Kingdom of where these tourists flock every year in thousands? This time around, instead of pina coladas, it seems like it's a real sorry situation over there. That seems to be like a big economical dent, let alone the $5.5 billion that it is being estimated is going to cost to rebuild Lahaina alone.
Well, absolutely. When a place is faces such disasters, the impacts are several folds in terms of economy. That's what we are also seeing in India. How when forests get affected, you have tourism linked to your economy that gets affected, and that has a multiplier effect, which means it also inhibits your capacity to recover from these disasters because your economy is hit, and you get into that vicious cycle, which means you have less resources to also prepare for the next disaster. So that's exactly the reason we should be looking at how we can reduce such disasters, and that's why when we talk about climate action, we talk about 3 pillars. First is mitigation, and that's why I was referring to the cause of the problem. And with respect to Hawaiian wildfires, there are also discussions happening on how we continue to use fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are the core cause of the climate crisis. But the United States itself is increasing the drilling of oil and gas, and then not investing sufficiently into adaptation. There is a data which says that you invest $1 into preparedness, you actually save several dollars that you will have to spend later on the recovery. Look at what we are seeing right now. So we need to really understand, as you very rightly said, prevention is better than cure. But unfortunately, we have reached a point where we have to continue to scale up our efforts in terms of prevention, but also being prepared to deal with such disasters. And that's why, as we all are witnessing, that the Hawaiian government is not able to respond. They just don't know how to send a proper early warning and how to support the evacuation effort. And the scale is making it a lot more difficult.
Well, just one question that I want to ask Harjeet Singh. Harjeet Singh, when we talk about the manner in which we have this kind of large-scale disasters happening because of climate change, one of the things that significantly, when I was going through some of these studies, what I understand is that the tropics are getting much more drier, while the tundra regions are becoming much more vegetative, and the ice caps area is also becoming like tundra. It's like the traditional borders that existed between different vegetations are changing. So the tropics are becoming drier. In many places, it's being reported that places that were rich with rain and this thing, it's becoming much more drier in the last 3-4 years. Is that the case?
Essentially, we need our geography books to undergo a revision.
Revision and what is happening.
Our tundra and tropical need a thorough revision, it seems like.
Well, absolutely, and it is really unfortunate that majority of developing countries also lie in tropical regions. So look at how geographically also developing countries are a lot more vulnerable, although we are seeing disasters in other parts, in temperate regions as well. But definitely the tropical regions are far more vulnerable to these kind of changes. But at the same time, we are seeing erratic weather pattern across. And the way vegetation is going to change, it's going to affect the whole climate system. And that's the worry. And that's exactly the reason IPCC talks about cascading impacts. So places where we did not have such vegetation, seeing vegetation is also going to change the microclimatic impacts first, and then it's going to cause ripple effects. So we are really up for a very, very uncertain climatic system, and what made this whole planet habitable was the stability of the climate system, and that itself is now changing, and people need to internalize how big the danger is, and how we need to be really investing into some of these issues and be prepared.
Absolutely. Mahesh Palawat, Vice President, SkyMet, with us also on the broadcast. And Mr. Palawat, always a pleasure to be speaking to you. We do want your opinion on essentially what's happening in terms of the cloudburst and the floods in Uttarakhand and the mountainous region. But before that, your viewpoint on how you're looking at the Hawaiian wildfires, what's happening in Maui. The death toll is nearing the 100 mark and figure. Your thoughts and opinions on that?
As our guest has already mentioned, that tropical region is facing you can say extreme weather events, and due to global warming and climate change, these intense weather activities are rising year by year. And when heat is very high and the leaves are dry and there is a high wind velocity, when a small spark can one entire you can say hectares, lakhs of hectares of forest, which is happening in many tropical regions, and we have seen why also. And this type of devastation is reoccurrence will be there year by year, because the extreme weather events are on rise, and they will, until unless we address the problem of climate change, until unless we reduce the emission of greenhouse gases and the fossil fuel burning, until then we do not expect anything that which may contain these type of natural calamities.
All right. Mr. Palawat, do stay on with us, even as we are going to change segments real quickly, move into what's happening back at home. Harjeet Singh, once again, after the grim task of rescue personnel trying to figure out if there are any, human remains that are left inside these charred vehicles and gutted buildings and stores and residential complexes, what next? We just heard Josh Green, and Josh Green, had to say, the governor of Hawaii, he said that we're focusing on housing. We're focusing on shuttle services to people who are now out there in the open, who don't have shelter, above their heads. Do you think the government is doing enough in terms of the help that it's putting out for the people?
Well, as people have already raised concerns that government is not able to help them adequately at this moment. Government has now realized the really magnanimity of the problem, and they are trying to respond. The very first step is providing them immediate shelter and food, non-food items, and then the recovery efforts are going to be extremely challenging because the impact of fires are going to stay for a very long time. And they have to relook at what kind of housing they are going to now reconstruct. And if these areas are going to remain vulnerable the way they have seen fires, they will also have to relocate people, which is a totally different ballgame, which requires a lot of resources, and people need to change their habitation, and they have to look for new livelihoods. Rehabilitation, reconstruction is always very time-taking. It requires a lot of resources, and it also changes the socio-economic situation of that area. So it is going to be quite a challenging time for Hawaii going forward.
Absolutely. You've really hit the nail on the head, because even as power has been restored only for 60% of the consumers, according to a latest utility report. I'm going through the Washington Post, a live blog. It says the phones are ringing inside the body bags. People are still looking for their families and their loved ones. So that's the grim situation right now on the ground. Mr. Palawat, in terms of what's happening in Hawaii, what are some of the learning lessons that India can now take up? I mean, forest fire is not something that's new to us. Take a look at what happens in Uttarakhand every now and then, Himachal Pradesh, Corbett. We have our fair share of forest fires as well. And even though there is no loss of human life, there is loss of forest cover for sure. And sometimes property also gets damaged. Some learning lessons that you could point out here for the viewers?
Yes, we have seen this type of disaster across the globe, and it is recurring year by year. And this type of situation is also happening in many parts of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. We have seen recently, and we must aware the people that we can say the habitant, or you can say the population should be placed, or you can say the construction or the housing should be away from these areas like the dense forest. And whenever there is heat wave conditions are prevailing, this type of forest fire is very common. And we can say that the government should aware the people about these type of incidents and the impact of forest fire. And this is all we can say the masses and the combined effort of masses as well as government is needed to mitigate these natural calamities.
Absolutely. You know, everything that has happened is a learning curve. I mean, from in my limited opinion and from where I'm looking at these, horrid visuals, Varghese, it seems like everything is a learning curve. I'm going to give you the last, we spoke about the weather pattern, the wind conditions, we spoke about the non-native grass, we spoke about how the government could have acted better. How do we wrap this up? How do we...
See, right now, I think our guests also will agree that when we look at climate change, we are just addressing the symptoms now. And I think the sickness is out there, and what's causing that sickness is further out there. We cannot be dependent on fossil fuel. We are not meeting our carbon targets. We are not looking at the fact that our planet is having a big fever, and that's, we are just treating the symptoms. You think you give a paracetamol and the fever comes down, just like that, we'll try to mitigate one part of the disaster. But in the longer run, we are going to see drier tropics if we don't address our issues. We are going to see several kind of social unrest happening because food security is going to get impacted. Water is going to be one of the biggest. Drinkable water is something that is going to be impacted. So, and you're going to see complete erosion of coastal cities and destruction of coastal regions. We are going to see some countries also go under the water probably if we don't do anything about it and still keep denying about it. The fact remains is that we need to act now. Probably you are at a critical juncture where you can act before it is too late.
And don't we say this every now and then, every COP summit, every climate change summit, we talk about it, but we'll travel in our big fancy Boeing jets, spreading as much as carbon footprint as possible. The lakhs and crores of rupees that go into, the catering at these big summits. I mean, I just think it's all mere lip service that happens most of the time.
I understand that, but then there is a big question you have to take. Will you decouple dollar from the oil? Then probably we'll be thinking about something, because there is an economic impact to which they're trying to...
The economy and climate change, I think that's the direct,
so you need to decouple the dollar from the oil is what I believe.
Certainly. Gentlemen, Mr. Plawat and Harjit Singh ji, please continue to stay on with us. We're going to slip into a quick commercial break here. On the other side, we're going to talk about what's essentially happening in Uttarakhand and in Himachal Pradesh. Latest news of a cloudburst. 7 people have died. Walls have collapsed. 620 plus roads that have been closed yet again. This is the second time this year alone that we're seeing 90% excess precipitation in the mountainous region. That's coming right on the other side. Stay tuned for those stunning visuals, of course, of destruction, unfortunately.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. Streaming now.
मैं इमरान अहमद खान नियाजी सबके दिल से हल्फ उठाता हूँ.
When Imran Khan came initially into politics, he thought his personal popularity would be sufficient for him. It didn't happen.
The retired military generals are openly saying that Imran Khan is a better choice.